Today we'll be looking at Radiata Stories, an action RPG developed by Tri-Ace and published by Square Enix for the PlayStation 2 in January of 2005. This is a game that completely flew under my radar back then, but thanks to a suggestion from one of our viewers, I've had the opportunity to dive into what I would so far consider to be an extremely charming and engaging experience. Very few games attempt to deliver the kind of tone that Radiata Stories embraces, and fewer still can pull it off well, but Tri-Ace seems to do it effortlessly here, which I found to be really impressive. I can't emphasize tone enough here because I honestly feel it's what Radiata Stories does best. It serves as a great example of how every aspect of a game, from the writing, voice acting, art style, animation, music and sound design, to the battle mechanics, exploration, and quest structure, all come together and seamlessly convey a focused, unified tone. I think world consistency is something that can be very difficult to nail down, and even in some of my favorite games, there are times where a joke, character, or narrative choice just don't seem to fit with everything else that had been conveyed up to that point. I'm only 6 hours into Radiata Stories, but so far it seems to really have this element locked down. I think this is best displayed in the game's main character, Jack Russell. From the moment we're introduced to him, every element of the game is crafted with purpose to inform the player about who he is. We see him come wandering out of his bedroom, presumably long after his sister has been up getting things ready, with a slouched back, wild hair, and his pajamas put on backwards, which is highlighted in a subtle way with the camera shot selection. The music and the delivery from the actor all work together to reinforce the idea that by the end of the scene where Jack leaves home in hopes of becoming a knight of the Kingdom of Radiata, he really has a lot of growing up to do. Maybe all of this is to be expected from competent storytelling, but what impresses me is that the developers were able to implement this character's personality into the way the gameplay mechanics are designed as well. We're shown very early on that Jack is lively, ambitious, and has a good heart, but he's also brazen, selfish, and insubordinate. What better way to reinforce this aspect of his temperament than to build a kicking mechanic into exploration? You can basically kick anything in the game, and this becomes the primary system for checking drawers, pots, or anything in the environment for hidden items and treasure. You can even kick NPCs, which will at first annoy them, but will eventually initiate a duel. This is a clever, hilarious, and most importantly, tonally consistent mechanic that tells us something about the main hero. It's wonderfully subtle and brings lots of laughs to a game that's already well written and delivered in the more traditional narrative sense, and it's something that I found enormously entertaining. You even see this kind of playfulness in the battle system, where certain status ailments have to be shaken off by floundering the control stick. This power walk animation had me rolling, and for a long time I found myself power walking to all my destinations. The game is riddled with this kind of humor, and again, I found it so impressive how every aspect of the game was perfectly unified in delivering this refreshing tone. The characters I've met so far are great, but also extremely archetypal. Usually that would bother me, but in a world where power walking around and kicking everything in sight feels appropriate, archetypal characters certainly don't feel out of place, especially when used for comedic effect. I was kind of blown away when I discovered that there were over 170 recruitable characters in the game, but it also made me wonder how unique or truly useful each one of them could possibly be. According to what I've read, it's impossible to recruit every character on a single playthrough, and requires at least 2 playthroughs to complete the list. On paper, the plot seems very slowly paced in the early stages, but when delivered with the kind of playful candor delivered here, it never feels like it's dragging. Once the story really starts moving though, it goes in directions I didn't expect, which was really nice to see. I've also read that at one point, a choice you make splits the plot into 2 directions and sets the player off on separate paths. I imagine that this would lead to excellent replay value, especially considering that the player can't recruit all optional NPCs on one playthrough. As for combat, I'm a sucker for action RPGs in general, so I was immediately drawn in here. It helped that the game had a perfectly comprehensible and fun tutorial. Yeah, I enjoyed the tutorial, it was fun. How often do you hear that? Anyway, it's actually pretty simple, perhaps even a little too easy in a lot of ways, but that's not to say that there isn't any challenge to be found, especially if you kick the wrong people. Circle serves as your attack button, but it doesn't function quite like a more strict action system. Rather, when you press circle, Jack will run towards his currently selected target and attack if he isn't already within sword length. You can also hold down X to block incoming attacks, and if you return the blow with the correct timing, you'll perform a counterattack that does a little more damage. You can also quickly press X twice to dodge backward. Item use is handled with L1, which freezes the battle while navigating the menu. As you attack targets, you build up what the game calls Volti points, which are used by pressing the square button. Performing a Volti blow requires 10 points and does this sort of lunging attack which deals a lot more damage and often knocks your foes off their feet. You can also perform Volti blasts, which require 100 points, but as of yet I haven't unlocked that ability. I believe this attack by Ridley is an example of what they look like. I also thought it was pretty cool that the game allows you to customize your attack combo patterns, giving the player freedom to insert newly gained abilities into their combo string. Down the line, you'll be able to give commands to your party members as well, and arrange them into battle formations, called links in this game, to give yourself strategic advantages. Again, after only 6 hours of play, I haven't been able to test these out myself. From what I've played so far though, the winning strategy generally is to read enemy attacks which have long wind-up times, circle around and attack them when they're vulnerable during a cooldown. The only time where this hasn't worked for me is in duels where I was alone against large groups of powerful soldiers. Overall, I'd say the combat is a little too easy for my taste, but it's still serviceable and fitting with the tone of the game, which I think is impressive and entertaining enough to make up for it. So far, I'm really enjoying Radiata Stories. I think it says a lot that a tone that generally isn't appealing for me has completely won me over in this case. I love its consistency and self-awareness, and how cleverly the developers have used that to keep me laughing regularly. If I were to use one word to describe this game, it would be fun. It just totally embraces the meaning of that word and seeks first and foremost to deliver a fun experience to the player. If that sounds appealing to you, then I totally recommend giving it a try. Hopefully I'll have time to cover it in more depth soon, but until then, thanks for watching, and let me know what you think of the game in the comments. I'll see you guys again really soon.